Hey everybody, it's Olivia with Tennessee Conservative News, here to bring you this week's Big 7 update. We have a lot of juicy stuff to dive into. We've got a nullification bill, a homeschool bill, more illegal alien nonsense, a family-friendly act that doesn't seem so family-friendly, and more. But before we dive in, I just want to remind everybody who's watching to subscribe to our free daily e-newsletter if you don't already. So simple, so easy. Head over to TennesseeConservativeNews.com. You can sign up for it right there, and it's delivered to your inbox every day, full of lots of juicy stories and news and all sorts of things to keep you engaged and aware here in our state. You can also text news to 423-205-5600. Again, that's news to 423-205-6500. And of course, follow us on all of our social media platforms, at least the ones that haven't shadow banned us yet. But we're on X, Gab, Getter, Truth, Rumble, MeWe, and Parler, which is back too. So we're, everywhere, as we should be. So let's dive in to our Big 7 for this week. First on our list, conservative lawmaker brings back nullification bill for the 4th year in a row. So this is Senator Janice Bowling's 4th time sponsoring the Restoring State Sovereignty Through Nullification Act. So she originally sponsored this bill in 2022 after witnessing the aftermath of pandemic lockdowns, mandates, restrictions. We all remember how tyrannical that was. So this bill would aim to end Tennessee's practical participation with federal actions that it finds constitutionally violate, right? So anything that we don't agree is constitutional, the state can say, not today, thanks a lot, see ya. So Janice said on the bill, I think we all have to concur it's an undeniable fact that our federal government has grown well beyond its specifically enumerated powers. And that's the key right there, is that specifically enumerated phrase. I think what happens in constitutional interpretation is a lot of people forget that the federal government only has the power to do exactly what's listed in the Constitution. No more, no less. They're enumerated powers for a reason. We didn't want them encroaching on the states and having this kind of backwards idea of federal sovereignty over state sovereignty, which is kind of where we're at now. And the Supreme Court did not help matters when they decided that they were going to give themselves a power grab and make themselves the law of the land instead of relying on the Constitution to do so. So the United States Congress is denied certain lawmaking powers by the First Amendment, right? That's part of the enumerated powers. The U.S. Constitution also denies federal government powers not delegated to it. Again, that's the enumerated powers portion. As Bowling has stated repeatedly since 2022, while the nullification process is not new, her proposed Nullification Act would create an orderly pathway for Tennessee to use the process when invoking state nullification of federal action. So she actually has 5 different ways that the state could invoke nullification, which I think is awesome. The first is by executive order by the governor. The second, an introduction of a bill of nullification through the General Assembly. Then we have a finding or holding of nullification from a Tennessee court. Then, on an even more local level, we have a petition of the executive or legislative bodies of 10 cities and or counties, and my favorite, a petition of 2,000 registered state voters. That's huge. I think we find a lot of times in Tennessee that the voter kind of gets left behind and kicked to the curb as far as actually being able to express their voice. So being able to do an act like nullification through voter petition is a pretty powerful thing. Now, I will go on the record and comment that nullification is already in the Constitution via the 10th Amendment, but it would be great to have a piece of legislation that helps facilitate that process and makes it easily accessible for all citizens. So, number 2, a powerful pro-homeschooling bill, which is endorsed by HSLDA and THEA, called the Tennessee's New Free Act. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, and the Tennessee Home Education Association, THEA, have officially announced support for the new Family Right to Educational Emancipation Act. Ooh, that's a fun title. Or the FREE Act, if you don't like to say all of those words in one breath. So this is also carried in the legislature by Janice Bowling, and on the House side, it's going to be Todd Warner as the representative on that bill. So this bill was actually written by the Tennessee homeschool advocacy group Free Your Children. And when we spoke to Tiffany Boyd of Free Your Children, her team who were at the state capitol last week, they actually let us know that they were in Nashville for two reasons. So firstly, she said, we're here today in opposition to Governor Lee's Education Freedom Scholarship Act, but we are also here today because we've written our own piece of legislation to give parents in the state of Tennessee complete and total educational autonomy, which we currently do not have. The bill is crucial for real freedom in Tennessee. Every legislator that claims they believe that parents are the best equipped to make educational decisions for their children should also lend their support. This is true school choice. And I think that's really important given that the Education Freedom Scholarship Act was not everything that it was promised to be. And we're now pouring more money to prop in our terrible public education system. And here's the thing about homeschooling, is everybody thinks that homeschoolers are going to be weird and uneducated, but we haven't exactly seen the best and the brightest coming out of our public school system, right? We keep having to pour money in and make new programs and do all of this to try and keep our public schools barely afloat. And as a homeschool graduate myself, I can say that I am definitely in favor of anything that takes off restrictions from homeschoolers, because it gives parents so much freedom and so much choice to challenge their kids, grow their kids, pursue their kids, or let their kids pursue all their interests and their activities and the things that are going to best benefit and prepare them for life beyond school. So let's see, the bill is filed under HB 0552 and SB 0494, if you want to track that on the legislative website, and as introduced, creates a new category of independent homeschools that are not subject to the data collection, reporting, or assessment requirements applicable to existing independent homeschool programs, and exempts them from compulsory school attendance requirements. That's huge, because it's kind of hard to say that you have homeschool freedom when you're still tied to all the same regulations and procedures that public school students are tied to. It's not really free education choice then. The bill text also recognizes the fundamental right of parents to direct the education, upbringing, and care of their children, and acknowledges that parents have the primary role in determining the educational path for their children, including the choice to educate their children at home without interference or undue regulation from the state. That's my favorite sentence, and I think it's the most important one, because it's really going to make sure that the government doesn't have a say in not only if you can homeschool, but how you choose to homeschool. So not having to propose your curriculum, not having to get approval for your curriculum, all those sorts of things that end up inevitably tying homeschoolers to the government school system in some way. So great bill. We're going to be tracking that one, or at least I will, and I am all in favor if you wanted to know how Olivia would vote on that one. Next up on our list here, Tennessee illegal alien arrested for aggravated sexual assault of 10-year-old girl. This is horrifying, absolutely horrifying. So we have a 30-year-old Elias Toom Sheik was arrested on January 23rd after he was accused of sexually molesting a 10-year-old girl several times. That's terrible. Immediate bad things. I can't even say what should happen probably without getting in some trouble. He was charged with 2 counts of aggravated sexual battery and 1 count of attempted aggravated sexual battery. Police Chief Jason Arnold said the girl displayed extreme bravery in her willingness to come forward and report Sheik. He also said that Sheik offered her $5 to keep her mouth shut. It just keeps getting worse. Investigators say Sheik had several different fake IDs and social security cards from both Texas and California on him at the time of his arrest. Arnold said, "We got into his phone and found all kinds of evidence of identity theft and trafficking, and other crimes that are way, way worse, so that's being investigated." I don't know how it gets way, way worse than sexually molesting a 10-year-old, but that's just, I think, par for the course for what we're seeing with all these illegal aliens. Everyone, we have a lot of detractors who say they don't commit violent crimes. They're just here to pay their taxes and be good neighbors like everyone else. And yet every time we see an arrest like this, it's generally not just limited to the crime they're arrested for. This is just the one they happen to get caught on. There's rap sheets sometimes that go back years and from other states, which is even worse. And I think what's difficult with the illegal aliens that we're seeing here in Tennessee is our legislature's refusal to cut off the magnets that draw them here in the first place. So it's all well and good to cooperate with ICE and get them out and start those mass deportations. We're in favor of that 100%. But if we don't turn off the magnets that bring them here, like free education, then they're just going to come back and we'll end up being a sanctuary state without ever being a sanctuary state. So let's see. Police found a number of graphic images on Sheik's phone, including one which appeared to show an execution-style murder. Absolutely terrible. He's an illegal alien from Guatemala. He's being held in the Sumner County Jail on a $300,000 bond. We'll see if that one sticks. Also, an immigration detainer hold. No surprise there. He'll remain in custody until he is turned over to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Now, we shall see if he will be one of those lucky enough to get to enjoy President Trump's new accommodations at Guantanamo Bay. But we've also been seeing reports that some of the illegals that ICE is rounding up are being released, at least temporarily, because there are no more spaces in local county jails. So we're going to have to see how that all shakes out. We can arrest them, that's all well and good, but if we don't have any place to put them, it creates a problem, at least until we can get more presidents from other countries willing to fly their personal jets to come pick up their criminals. So that could be a challenge, but it's one that we hope will resolve itself rather quickly as we have new facilities being built and as some of them start to self-deport because they are afraid of being caught by ICE. So hopefully awful men like this can go and at bare minimum be locked up in a cage and at best have their maker judge them sooner rather than later. They can go meet their creator.
Guys, our expenses are through the freaking roof right now. We got Adelia up there. We've got reporters reporting like crazy. We need you to send in a little bit of cash if you can. The annual campaign to send Adelia up there did not go quite as well as I'd hoped. And so we still need y'all to chip in. If you are filthy rich, if you've had a rich uncle die, if you can write a larger check, boy, that sure is helpful. And you can mail it to P.O. Box 625, Signal Mountain, Tennessee, 37377. I had a guy send me a note the other day, actually, I think it was today or yesterday, and he said, I'm increasing my donation from $5 to $25. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't do more. I'm like, that's a lot. I appreciate that. That is 5 times more than you were doing previously. We get 100, 200, 300 people giving $25 a month. I mean, that's enough to pay for some staff. That's enough to cover overhead, software expenses, and all the other things that nickel and dime us to death here at the Tennessee Conservative. I'm doing my part. I'm doing this for free. Like today, I sit down to do the news, and I'm like, good grief, I don't have time. I've got to go out of town next week. I'm in between conferences. But if I can dig in with my income, if I can dig in with my time, I just need you to come along. You don't have to do as much as me and as many on our staff, but we just need you to do your part. You can also go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com, hit that support button, and we will send you a Proud Tennessee Conservative tumbler and a koozie if you give $50 or more, or a recurring donation of $10 or more, and we'll send you a couple of bumper stickers, a directory, and my heartfelt thanks, which is frankly the most important thing.
All right, next on our list, we've got a freshman Tennessee representative introduces the Dismantling DEI Departments Act. Representative Aaron Mayberry has introduced his first bill as a freshman lawmaker. He was elected just last year in last year's election from District 68, which is Clarksville, Montgomery County. And this bill is entitled the Dismantling DEI Departments Act, which actually for once is a pretty accurate summary of what is actually going on. The bill is pretty straightforward. It's an act that would mandate a department, agency, or other unit of state government shall not maintain or authorize an office or department that promotes or requires discriminatory preferences in an effort to increase diversity, equity, or inclusion. It goes on to say all mandates, policies, programs, activities, guidance, regulations, enforcement actions, consent orders, or other declarations by such an office or department are void. Now, it also then includes that exact same text to include county, municipal, and metropolitan governments and any public institutions of higher education. So it's the same text from the top down saying no DEI departments, and if you have one, anything that comes out of there doesn't matter. So it seems like a pretty good bill on the surface. And this, of course, comes on the heels of President Trump's executive order, which kind of mandated the same thing on federal agencies. So we're obviously very excited about that. And we've been seeing the meltdowns over some of the closures and the weird DEI positions that none of us knew existed and in places that shouldn't exist, like our military. So that's been a successful campaign, and we definitely would support this measure. But let's dive into what else is going on with this bill. Now, it's important to know that Representative Mayberry was elected running primarily on the school choice platform, which a lot of candidates did. Reportedly, he got a lot of out-of-state money from PACs promoting the school choice. He was one of only 3 statewide candidates who earned Governor Bill Lee's endorsement, specifically because he supported Lee's voucher program. So he was obviously a very solid yes on the Education Scholarship Act that just passed through the special session. And he's referenced things like, campaign promises made, campaign promises kept as far as getting school choice passed. He also currently sits on the school board in Montgomery County. So he's a freshman, and it appears that he's kind of been taken under the wing of some of Tennessee's more notorious rhinos. William Lamberth is also listed as a sponsor on this, and Cameron Sexton, the Speaker of the House, both of whom have been pretty anti-conservative in the past. And Cameron Sexton is, in fact, the one who has denied our on-site reporter, Adelia, access to all of the same places that the rest of the press can go. So he's actively been stifling conservative journalism, and now he has a bill that wants to dismantle the DEI departments. So it's an interesting team up, I think, that they would sponsor this bill and he would go willingly with these rhinos. Jack Johnson is the Senate sponsor, another one of Tennessee's favorite rhinos, who has been under scrutiny for illegally coordinating with PACs during his most recent reelection campaign. So I have to question the integrity of this bill, which then leads me to point number 2 of, though it is a good bill in principle, what concerns me is this is another half-hearted effort with no actual teeth or consequences. There's no consequences listed at all if a government or a public institution of education does continue with their DEI office or does continue the practices. There's no consequences. There's no removal of funding. There's no rebuke. There's literally nothing other than a piece of paper that says you can't do this. So it's almost virtue signaling, I think, in a sense, to say, well, we did something about it. What more did you want? And we're following President Trump's lead, but we're not actually making an effective change. So it just seems to be another in a very long pattern of continuing to tell the voters that they handled the appropriate situation, but not actually having done anything about it. So we'll see how that shakes out. We'll also keep our eye on Representative Mayberry and see if he's willing to stand by his campaign promise of conservative voice for a new generation, or if he's just going to roll right along, since these rhinos seem to be more than willing to take him under their wing. So that will be an interesting one to watch. Next on our list here, yes, the Freedom to Grow Our Tennessee Families Act, which may have ulterior motives. Here's another one sponsored by a rhino we all know and probably don't love. Senator Richard Briggs, Republican, of course, has partnered with a Democrat representative, Caleb Hemmer, to introduce the Freedom to Grow Our Tennessee Families Act. Now, we're not completely against Democrats, pairing with Democrats. There have been some great bills proposed by Democrats, and we've partnered with them or supported that. There's a great bill. I don't know where it stands exactly now, but it's going to deal with the foster care system and how kind of orphans have to pay to take care of themselves here in the state. So there's some great bills, and sometimes we get some really great partnerships that show up, and we support that. But in this case, it's a little questionable given who this rep is and what he says his values are. But we'll get into that in a second. So in short, the Freedom to Grow Our Tennessee's Families Act basically encourages fertility treatments, okay? But the problem is it wants to mandate insurance coverage for all of these treatments, diagnostics, medications, etc., which ultimately will inevitably raise insurance rates. The text goes on to specify more conditions for certain procedures that must be provided and other requirements for insurance companies. Here's another catch for you. It also relies heavily on definitions, standards, and guidelines set by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the ASRM. Now, here's the kicker. On the ASRM website, DEI is featured on the mission, vision, and values page, including a commitment to promote diversity within the ASRM membership and leadership and to promote access to quality reproductive care for all patients. Interesting that we're relying on this organization to set the standard for what medical procedures are and are not considered, and fertility treatments. That's a big deal. So it's interesting that this would be the organization these lawmakers are relying on to shape a lot of this bill. Now, like I said, we're looped back around here to Democrat Representative Caleb Hemmer. So on his website, two of his issues, his major big important issues are reproductive health, which we all know that of course means pro-choice, pro-abortion, all that awful jazz. And secondly, the right of all Tennesseans to marry the person you love. So obviously in favor of gay marriage, gay partnerships, et cetera, which I'm sure translates to rights for LGBT, QRS, LMNOP, all that. So it raises suspicions to me that a Republican would partner with this particular Democrat on a bill that's supposed to be aimed at growing families, when both of those issues on his website do the opposite. Kind of weird. Now, it could be that Hemmer's interest in the matter stems from his desire to make surrogacy and in vitro fertilization more accessible to homosexual couples. Now, this is based on some language in the bill which specifically provides for couples who would biologically be unable to conceive. The text's definition of fertility patient includes an individual or couple with infertility. Okay, here's the key: an individual unable to conceive as an individual or with a partner because the individual or couple does not have the necessary gametes for conception. Neither of these provisions explicitly excludes homosexual couples, and by default, one partner in a homosexual relationship could not have the necessary gametes for biological reproduction. So that's some red flags to me. The bill would also appear to additionally place more strain on the taxpayer by requiring fertility treatments to be wrapped into the Medicaid program. So not only are you going to pay, our insurance rate's going to potentially go up, but you, the taxpayer, will foot the bill as well. Not ideal, I don't think. So that one's a little deceptive in title. All right, moving right along, we've got conservative lawmaker running bill to prohibit out-of-state political action committees from influencing GOP primary elections. Ooh, that's a big one. Now, this is one of those Democrat-Republican partnerships we were talking about that we think will actually be productive, because here we go. Senator Janice Bowling, she's on a roll this week, is sponsoring this bill with Democrat Representative Vincent Dixie in the House. So this bill would seek to put an end to the practice of PACs that are headquartered in other states for making contributions, including in kind, that's a good catch, to candidates in a state primary elections, specifically in Republican races. This was huge during this last election cycle. Like we talked about earlier, especially with the school voucher program, there was so much outside money from PACs poured into candidate races and primary elections to get pro-school choice, which really is AKA pro-Bill Lee's voucher scam act, passed. So this is a pretty big deal. Millions of dollars from out-of-state groups was poured into promoting school choice voucher candidates in 24. We just covered that. And PACs that supported Governor Bill Lee's school choice plan ran a slew of negative campaign ads that targeted lawmakers who were against and or propped up those who were for. The infusion of funds from the super PAC with ties to Club for Growth billionaire Jeff Yass into attack ads led conservative lawmakers Senator Frank Nicely of Strawberry Plains and State Representative Brian Ritchie, who was running for the Senate seat of retiring Senator Art Swan. Both of them ended up losing their respective primaries because of this out-of-state influx of cash. Bowling said that when the people the lawmakers represent in districts should have the loudest voice over PACs who are not based in Tennessee. What more do you really have to say? It's pretty wild that we would allow outside organizations to dictate the course of our elections, which again tells you got to follow the money and root out all of that corruption that is obviously directly tied to the purse strings. With regard to the bill applying only to the controlling political party, which for now would be the Republican supermajority, Bowling said she would welcome an amendment from the Democratic Party that would apply the legislation to both Republicans and Democrats alike. Ultimately, it'd be good not to have any outside money coming in, but I think even at least getting this GOP money and these outside influences for GOP elections is huge for voters in the state right now. So great bill. We'll hopefully see that one come through with some bipartisan support. And finally here, we've got Republican lawmaker introduces bill to keep recovery houses farther away from Tennessee kids. Yeah, that seems pretty good, I think. Representative Greg Martin is the sponsor of this bill, which would allow local governments to adopt ordinances that require a sober living home to be located at least 1,000 feet, which probably could be more, away from any K through 12 school, preschool, or daycare facility. Yeah, so far so good. At the end of the 2024 A communal house for recovering alcoholics and drug addicts was found located in the residential neighborhood of Chase Meadows, which is home to over 50 families in Hamilton County. That's not good. The halfway house is also located near an elementary school. To make matters worse, the house is self-managed by offenders who reside there with no oversight by the Tennessee Department of Corrections or any other public agency. Yikes. The Chase Meadows Recovery House is just one of 29 such houses in Hamilton County alone. It's the kids. They want to just keep going after those kids. It's kind of weird that there's not already a law in place, particularly when, unfortunately, I think we would find that a lot of people in these halfway houses probably are not allowed to be 1,000 feet within children anyway. I can't say that for sure, but I would guess that there's a high statistical crossover. So that's pretty interesting that this bill is now necessary, but obviously we want to get these people away from our kids. We want everyone to have a happy, healthy, quick recovery. We want you to change your life. We want you to be better and be a productive member of society, but we will protect the kids in the meantime. They deserve at least that much. Chase Meadows residents fear for the safety of their children following a shooting that occurred last November close to Hickson Elementary School. Yep. The shooting, which involved a resident of the recovery house, happened just minutes after children walked by on their way to school. The Chattanooga Police Department has received frequent emergency calls regarding drug and larceny activity at the house, as well as psychiatric emergency calls. Again, not a total surprise. I would think that the crossover numbers of people who already should not be around children would be pretty high within these halfway houses. In 2023, law enforcement responded to a dead on arrival call due to a fatality resulting from a fentanyl, meth, and cocaine overdose. We know how much of a problem fentanyl is in this country, and we know how very little it takes to kill anyone, let alone a child who should be nowhere near any of those substances. So I think that's a good bill. I think hopefully that should pass without too much trouble. And I would be happy if it said they needed to be in the next state, but that's probably not the easiest option or the most realistic. But that's just Olivia's musings, if you will. And that's it, everybody. We did it. You stuck with me. Thanks for hanging in there. But before you go, if you could, we would love to have your support. If you're a fan of what we're doing here at Tennessee Conservative News, we are a small but mighty organization, and we could always use some support. You can go to tennesseeconservativenews.com/support. We would be honored if you would give of your hard-earned treasure to help keep conservative journalism alive in Tennessee. As a reminder, please subscribe to all of our channels, our podcasts, our daily newsletter. We love to see you. We are so grateful for each and every one of you. You guys all make this possible. It's our pleasure and our delight to keep you up to date what's going on in Tennessee. And we will see you tomorrow with the newsletter, or we'll see you next week for TenCon's Big 7 update. Thanks, everybody.